Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247.com. And today we are previewing Texas and Arkansas Saturday at 2:30 on ABC. The Longhorns will take on their longtime rival, the Arkansas Razorbacks, and joining us to preview it is the publisher of Hawg, HAWG Sports.com, Trey Biddy. Trey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's coaching search season, so that's, you don't really take care of yourself very well. You just kind of keep your eyes open all the time, but still a football team to follow and two more games that are very important to Arkansas and Arkansas fans.
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas, they've lost 8 in a row, but 6 have come by 6 points or less, 5 by 3 points or less. They're coming off a 1-point loss against LSU. So they're still fighting. They're still scrapping. There's life in these Hogs. Yeah, Trey, is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't quit. I mean, a lot of teams in situations like this would have let go of the rope, obviously, and I think Petrino has done a good job of keeping them together and kind of, putting the message, you got to put some good stuff on film, no matter if you're here next year or somewhere else. And they've kind of bought into that, as weird as that is, but they seem to play just below whatever opponent they're playing. It doesn't matter if it's Ole Miss, or Memphis or who it is. It's just whatever that is, whatever that standard is, they find a level just below that. You mentioned the number of losses they've had by 3 points. Five games they have lost by a combined 11 points. And that doesn't include the Ole Miss game where they were driving down the field in Ole Miss territory as time was going down, I think under 2 minutes to play, and they fumbled the ball. Everybody in that stadium felt like Arkansas was about to go punch it in, and they fumbled. The next week against Memphis, who is not as good a team as Ole Miss, but they played down to that level, and they're driving in the red zone. They're down 32-31, and they fumble the ball. It's just whatever it takes. Against Mississippi State converted 2 fourth downs to win that game on their final drive when Arkansas was in the lead. Arkansas was beating Auburn. This is a game that's not by 6 points. This is by 9 points. Arkansas had a lead with 9:04 left in that game and proceeded to turn the ball over 4 times in the final 9:04 to lose the game. It's just like they find a way, no matter what it is, to lose games time after time. And it almost feels like statistically it almost feels like the other team at some point should mess up. Like one of these teams should mess up at the end, but it's always Arkansas. It's always Arkansas that's messing up. And it is actually remarkable that they are still battling, but they keep finding ways.
Well, and it's really weird because Arkansas's offense is the strength of the team. Mm-hmm. The defense has struggled. There's no doubt about it, giving up 32 points per game. But it's the offense that has committed these turnovers late in games, right? I mean, yeah. That's a double crusher because that's the strength of your team.
Yeah, the offense sometimes just looks unstoppable. And then in key moments like against LSU, you needed to punch it in on 4th and 1. You had plenty of opportunities around the goal line and you get stuffed. Right before half, they're about to score and they're at the goal line and they throw an interception. It's just like, or they're driving on the opening drive and they fumble the ball, like just marching it down LSU's throat. LSU's like sleepwalking at the beginning of the game. It's just like whatever it takes. What is it going to take this week for us to lose this game? It's almost like they huddle up and say, like, all right, guys, like, let's almost get this one. And that's literally how it feels. And everybody in the stands, everybody on the sidelines seems to expect it to happen. And I think it's a mentality thing in a lot of ways. I think you're maybe missing a guy or two on your team. It's just like, look, we're going to get out there and we're not going to let this happen. We're going to get out there and get this stop, or we're going to go down and score. And I don't know. I feel like there's something missing with that regard because, and with Talon Green, like he looks like Superman 3 quarters of the game. And then the other quarter of the game, it looks like, he's toting kryptonite or something. It's just, it doesn't make any sense how this team on paper should be winning several games. I think Petrino said, like on the sheet, they should have won 4 games. that they lost, and but they lost all of them because of different circumstances. So should be an interesting matchup with Texas. Texas is really good at stopping the run. Arkansas has been a very strong running team. Texas does a good job of getting to the quarterback, and Arkansas has given up some sacks, but they're an improved offensive line, improved at protection versus what they were last year. So Texas is a hard team to get a read on, though.
Yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
About that, Trey. I kind of want to, piggyback off of that and stay with Arkansas's offense. What if you talk about Omega Blake, Raylan Sharp, and Rowan Jones? I asked that question because Steve Sarkisian's pointed to some of the pass yards that the Longhorn defense has given up over the past 3 weeks. And one of the culprits, at least in Steve Sarkisian's eyes, is Texas' inability to get receivers down after making the catch, yards after catch. And that was a big issue for Texas in 2023. Just wonder if you could talk about those guys, maybe, just their strengths, weaknesses, and maybe their ability to create yards after catch.
Yeah. Arkansas has been pretty beat up at wide receiver. They lost at the beginning of the year. They lost Ismail Cece before the season even started. They lost Jalen Brown, who was a starting wide receiver for them. Monte Harrison, who was their kind of big body wide receiver, lost him also. So they've been pretty beaten up. So it says, I think, a lot about the core overall that they've been able to have some success. Now, they've tailed off a little bit. Omega Blake hasn't had the games that he had, earlier in the year. It's something, has drifted off a little bit. And, Raylan Sharp has been there. The guy that I think is a real dangerous player, and I don't even think he had a catch Saturday, but Rohan Jones at tight end, who you mentioned, he only has 14, 15, 16 catches this season, but he's averaging 30 yards a catch. Every time he touches the ball, something good happens. He is a real matchup problem for linebackers and is explosive after the catch. He's probably been their best run after catch guy. And they have other guys like Courtney Crutchfield was a very highly regarded guy, had his first catch last weekend, so maybe he's starting to kind of come on for him. But they really need Omega Blake to be more consistent than he's been. For a long stretch, he had at least 5 catches in every game, probably through the first 7 games or so. And I don't think that's happened maybe the last couple. But they have some weapons. It's just Talon, for whatever reason, just seems to hit it's just kind of like he looks unstoppable. He's throwing the ball well. He's running all over the place, and then it's just like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing that ball? Why are you, just stuff that doesn't seem to make sense. One of his he had 2 interceptions on Saturday. One of them, he's rolling right. I think it's a bootleg or something. Well, the tight end underneath is the first option in this route, in this play. And he throws it into coverage. The tight end is wide open. That's his first guy. But he throws it deeper to the guy that's covered and throws an interception. So there's just stuff like that drive you crazy. At the same time, Talon does so many things that keep you in games, and then it seems to do something that kind of costs you also.
Trey, one quick follow-up, and apologies for those listening to the audio. Got that squared away. It's the issue with having multiple mics and making sure I'm speaking to the right one here. But Trey, an issue for Texas this year offensively has been starting the game fast. They looked like they broke out a little bit against Vandy, scored 17 first quarter points. Last week was a struggle, only 3. And that's kind of been the theme for Texas offense this year. I was wondering if you could talk about Arkansas's ability early in games, because if there's an area where Texas seems to be weak, whether it's on offense, really on defense, quite frankly, it's been starting games and making sure that they're in position, not having to play catch up come the second, third, and fourth quarter.
Yeah, well, Arkansas loves to allow teams to play catch up in the third, fourth quarter. They have really struggled as a team in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter, but really that third quarter coming out, they look usually really strong, and it's almost like there's some kind of mentality like, we got this. They can't stop us, and that goes back to last year. And I don't know if that's like a Talon Green thing or something with him being the quarterback or what, but I take it back to that Oklahoma State game. I think it was week 2 last year, and they're just dominating Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State can't stop them. And it's just like they found just enough ways for the game to get into overtime, like throwing a pick 6, when they're going down to go up by 21-0, and then they throw a pick 6 and then fumbling the ball and muffing a punt. And, it's just like, what can we do? I don't know what it is, but it always seems to happen. Second half this is not a very good second half football team. I mean, and that should be obvious by the way they've lost so many games. But usually Arkansas starts off pretty strong. And, there have been opportunities also where they, like last weekend, they had an opportunity to really put their heel on LSU's throat and go up 21. but they just went completely opposite way. They had penalties. Talon takes huge sacks whenever and sometimes it's great because he'll retreat pretty deep, and then he takes such long strides. Kind of remind you in a way from that long strider deal of like maybe Vince Young in that regard, or Matt Jones at Arkansas. People just take really bad angles on him, and he pulls away from them. But sometimes it gets him into a lot of trouble. There's so many times we've seen in his career where Arkansas has a field goal. They're in field goal range, and it's third down, and he'll retreat and take like a 10 or 12-yard sack, and suddenly a chip shot field goal has a lot of pressure on it. And stuff like that happens all the time. But Arkansas generally a pretty strong starting team. Last weekend, they fumbled on their opening drive, but then they blocked a punt and returned it for a touchdown, which, again, like the statistics of losing a game in which you block a punt are extremely low, but Arkansas just seems to find a way anyway. I don't know. I think both of these teams are hard to put your finger on, but Arkansas has obviously been a lot worse than Texas has.
Well, a guy who's made a bit of an impact for Texas, who transferred from Arkansas, is Brad Spence. Mm-hmm. Eric and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, but 4 tackles for loss, three sacks in limited time. He's playing primarily as an edge rusher. I think he was primarily a linebacker at Arkansas. Brad Spence, what do you remember about him? And is he any kind of X factor in this game?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's, that there's an underlying problem there. Like Arkansas just, Texas basically just took him. Arkansas couldn't afford to keep him. And Arkansas can't be in a situation as an SEC team where another team just, can take one of your players like that. And it's happened not just for Texas. Ole Miss just took 3 of Arkansas's best players off their roster because they couldn't afford to keep them. Oklahoma just took one of Arkansas's wide receivers. Like that kind of stuff can't happen at Arkansas, and they have to get that figured out. Secondly, with Brad Spence, the first thing I remember about him, his first game as a freshman, I believe it was a pick six. I think it was a pick six, but he got in late in the game, and you're just like, oh, that's a linebacker taking it to the house. And I mean, like 70 yards or something. So that was the first thing that jumped out to me about Spence. He did play some on the edge. They had a package where they would put him down closer to the line of scrimmage. But he was a really good linebacker at Arkansas. I mean, I was, when he left, I was just like, man, that's a blow for them. Now they had even with him leaving, linebacker corps was perceived to be the best unit on defense. Even with him leaving, but to me, he was a guy that had a really good chance to start for him this year also, and I think that was a blow. I always thought Spence is a good player.
Trey, I kind of want to go off the field here for a second, for the uninitiated, and that'd be me. Of course, Chip's been covering the Longhorns for a long time. I know you've been around program at Arkansas for a while. Me entering year 3, or I should say, finishing up year 3 covering Texas football. I still kind of getting acclimated with the Texas-Arkansas rivalry, right? And being on this side of things, all I hear is, well, those folks in Arkansas care, but all right. They're like, 4th in the pecking order in terms of rivals. I guess I shouldn't push in the position to have to justify whether that's true or false, but entering this game, what's the feeling around, Arkansas in terms of just facing Texas again, especially coming off of last year, which was a very close game?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's, I think a lot of the hatred towards Texas has been imparted on some of the younger people, but it's not really the same as it once was. I'm 48. People who are older than me remember a time when Arkansas wanted nothing more but to beat Texas and hated Texas and wouldn't even spell Texas's name forward, would sax it, or if they said Texas, they would spit after it, like people have a deep-rooted hatred for Texas who are, in that Gen X and older generations. This younger group, probably not as much. And I think actually, University of Arkansas is 34,000 students. When I went there, I enrolled in 96. I think there were 14,000 students. The population has grown dramatically. And one of the reasons is because you get in-state tuition now if you're a neighboring state to Arkansas. There are a ton of kids from Texas now at the University of Arkansas, and a lot of them, I would assume, grew up Texas fans, A&M fans, so on and so forth also. So you kind of have that mix at Arkansas also. But there was no bigger game under Sam Pittman than when Texas came to Arkansas in 2021. That was, they do attendance differently. It used to be kind of estimated actual attendance, and now it's like actual tickets sold. So you'll never break some of the old records for attendance. But that was the most heavily attended game in Arkansas football history, regardless of what the numbers say. And it was probably the best environment that I've ever been to for a Razorback game. Before that, I think it was probably the Sugar Bowl in 2011, January 2011 against Ohio State. But that was the best environment I think I've ever been in for a Razorback football game. And a lot of that was because of, that deep-rooted hatred for Texas. And, people in Arkansas, they feel like Texas is, entitled and, kind of a bully, and they don't like them. They never have. And it goes back to probably before the 1960s, but definitely when you talk about, the 1969 shootout with Nixon present and Arkansas seemingly having that game won, it goes back to those times for a lot of Arkansas fans. And there's just been, a team beats you and breaks your heart enough times, you start to hate them, and that's where it stems from.
Yeah, I mean, those battles in the 60s were epic. Darrell Royal told me, one of his best teams was 64.
Yeah.
And he said he'd never get over that loss. Of course, Arkansas won the national championship that year. And
Royal went to the Arkansas locker room after that game and told the players, like, you didn't just beat a good Texas team, you beat a great Texas team. And that was earlier in the year, obviously.
Yeah.
Versus the 69 game, which they moved to the end of the season for television.
Right. Yeah. And that Street to Peschel, where Street looks at Royal and says, 53 veer pass. And Royal said 53 veer pass. And yeah,
right.
And it was well covered. But yeah, Arkansas fans don't want to hear about that. Texas fans could hear about it all day. Trey, how do you see this game going on Saturday?
Yeah, I looked at the line. I saw 19.5, but I guess maybe my eyes are going, but I think it was like 10 or 10.5 or something like that. But I would expect, there's always a chance that a team like Arkansas that has been through so much heartache and losses let go of the rope. And in fact, part of me expects that to happen at any moment, and they still haven't done it. I would expect more of what we've seen. For Arkansas to play slightly below whatever Texas brings. If Texas is sleepwalking in this game, then Arkansas to play slightly below that. If Texas has their best going, then Arkansas to play slightly below that. I mean, it is really, it's almost comical how it doesn't matter who they play. Like, again, Memphis, if Memphis played Texas A&M, they would get smoked. But Arkansas played just below Memphis, and then they played just below Texas A&M. I mean, nobody put up 40 points on Texas A&M aside from Notre Dame, all season. But Arkansas can do it, But they also can't stop them. And a big problem with Arkansas also is getting the ball back. That's happened to them against Tennessee and against LSU last weekend. They weren't able to get the ball back, and we knew that going in because Arkansas is very thin on the defensive line. And you got Taylon Green, he's dynamic. He can lead you down the field and stuff. But when the defenses had to get a stop at the end of games, for the most part, they did it against Ole Miss for them. But when they've had to get a stop at the end of games, they haven't been able to do it. Teams can just run on them and take the clock down if they have a lead late. So it'd be important for Arkansas to get a lead and try to protect the lead versus try to come from behind. That's been no good for them so far this season. So I would expect, whatever Texas puts up, for Arkansas to put up about a score less.
Eric, you got one more?
Yeah, last one for me. Kind of piggybacking off a Chip and asking how you see this one playing out, and I'll ask this, of course, when I get my Q&A over to you. Who are your X factors? If Arkansas is going to win this game, who are your X factors?
Yeah. Defensively, Quincy Rhodes is been pretty dynamic as a pass rusher. He has 8 sacks. I think he's third, right behind Simmons right now at Texas. I think he's third with 8 sacks. He may still lead the SEC with tackles for loss. Entering last weekend, I think he had 14 of those. But he can be a real terror. He's a very talented player for him. So I would say him. Xavier Sori at linebacker has not had the season, and I think he's dealt with some injuries, but he's not had the season that he had last year when he had 99 tackles, was a preseason All-SEC guy, was former Georgia 5-star, transfer to Arkansas. So those two guys, I would say, on defense, especially Quincy Rhodes. On offense, I think there's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of weapons for Arkansas. Omega Blake, he's not picked it up really lately. Taylor Green, of course, can really make defenses look foolish. Mike Washington at running back is on the verge of a 1,000-yard season. He's a guy that transferred in from New Mexico State, wasn't really highly regarded, and he gets here and he's like, man, this guy's 6'2", 228 and can fly, and is a tough tackle. He's another guy to really keep an eye on. He's a very strong running back. I mentioned Rohan Jones a minute ago at tight end. He's a big matchup problem. The problems for Arkansas aren't putting up yardage and producing on offense. The problems for Arkansas is making, having a big moment at the end of games where they take advantage of a situation and go win the game. That's been the problem. I don't have any doubt that Arkansas can move the ball and make explosive plays on offense. I mean, they're one of the most explosive offensives in the country. It's just when the game is on the line, they just tend to falter.
All right, as far as coaching search season, what Bobby Petrino's making his case right now. Any favorites or candidates you think should get strong consideration?
Yeah, well, the latest we've heard out of it, and it's funny because I mentioned, I'm talking about the candidates and stuff, and people in my YouTube comments on my last video were it's obvious Trey doesn't know who the coach is, who's going to be, and I'm just like, I don't know that Hunter knows who the coach is going to be. I don't know that Hunter Yurachek knows who the coach is going to be yet. The last thing that he was telling boosters as of Thursday night was that they're down to about 8 people, and that he's looking – now this doesn't mean this is actually what he's doing, but this is at least what he's telling people, that he's looking for maybe more defensive-minded coach pairing it up with an offensive coordinator, and wants to have something done right at season's ends, before the chaos begins, before all the dominoes start falling. They don't want to get caught up in something like that. So that's kind of where they are. I know they've interviewed Jeff Traylor at UTSA. He was at Arkansas before, former high school coach in Texas, who's doing a lot with, not a very expensive roster right now. Although they're just 5-5 this season, so that's difficult. I think John Sumrall at Tulane is another guy that they would really jump at. I know they made contact with James Franklin and put together package and proposals and stuff, and he was asking around about Arkansas, but that was always a long shot from the beginning. Of course, he's ended up at Virginia Tech now. Alex Golish at South Florida is another guy that I think is in consideration. Will Stein, I know that they have interviewed up at Oregon, the offensive coordinator there. And, of course, Bobby Petrino is still in the mix, I think. I think you have to ask the question, do you go with a coordinator who has no head coaching experience, or do you stick with Bobby Petrino? And I think, Petrino's weakness has always been recruiting. He's a tremendous offensive play caller. He attention to detail, all that stuff. It's hard to put a lot of what's going on with this defense on him also. But I think in this day and age, maybe that's mitigated because of NIL and transfer portal. I think maybe it doesn't mean as much to build these relationships with high school recruits and stuff. And in Arkansas anyway, you don't have that access, that 250-mile radius to elite talent in the state of Arkansas. So maybe that's – I think if Arkansas can really embrace and get their ducks in a row with NIL, that could benefit a guy like Petrino, and really benefit any coach that comes to Arkansas, because the only thing preventing Arkansas, it's not fan support, it's not facilities, it's not the area, it's none of that stuff. The only thing that's hampered Arkansas in the past is population, access to elite talent. And I think, if they can get their ducks in a row marching in the right direction, which it feels like, and to me that's the most important thing, is injecting about $40 million into this football program over the next 4 years. So you're not 14th in spending, you're more in the 5 to 8 range in spending. That's the most important thing for any coach that's hired.
Yeah. Jeff Traylor. I love me some Jeff Traylor. That guy can recruit. And I know he's exhausted from people coming and taking his players.
Yeah. Players
wants to be at a program where he gets to go take other people's players. Trey, great stuff, man. Really, really appreciate the time. You making your way to Austin?
Yeah. As I said at the beginning of the season, when I booked all these trips, I signed up for something. I don't know what it is, but I signed up for something. So I was in Baton Rouge last week, and I'll be in Austin to watch this 2-8 football team.
All right, brother. Well, we'll see you. We'll see you Saturday. Thanks again so much. For Eric Henry, for Trey Biddy, I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com. Thanks so much for watching this episode of the Flagship Podcast, previewing Texas and Arkansas Saturday at 2:30 Central Time on ABC. Until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.